Now, there are multiple marketing research techniques that exist. And I know that you've learned about traditional ratings-based conjoint analysis, but I'm going to talk to you specifically about choice-based conjoint and why the top companies in the world are utilizing this methodology to make important decisions about their products and services. Now, let's imagine that you're a smartphone company and you're trying to make it in this market. You want to know if the idea you have for a new feature is going to attract consumers. Or perhaps if you're a new brand, how low do you have to price this smartphone in order to get people to buy it? Now, you can imagine that making these phones or implementing these features is not very cheap for the business. And that's why nailing the price and the features that go in the phone are extremely important. And that's why so many companies want to rely on data to get the right answer. More specifically, we should get feedback from shoppers so we can figure out how to price our product or service. Because if we charge too much, we can deter customers from actually buying, right? And if we charge too little, we could be leaving money on the table for the business. So we need that data to help us understand what consumers are going to be willing to pay. And we can do this all using choice-based conjoint analysis. So in a choice-based conjoint analysis survey, we show people multiple product concepts and ask them to choose which one they'd be most likely to purchase, much like what happens when you walk into the store today. And we do this over a series of screens, showing them different concepts on every screen. For example, in a choice-based conjoint, we have 8 tasks, or 8 of those questions. There are going to be 4 smartphones and what we call a none alternative, meaning that if none of the phones on the screen are appealing, they can always walk away from the shelf. Each of those smartphones are defined by attributes. Some of those attributes are things like the brand of the smartphone, or the type of camera, or the price. And within each of those attributes, we have our levels. So the attribute of brand has levels of Samsung, Google, Apple, and LG, for example. Now, we believe that by forcing respondents to make difficult trade-offs, we can learn what they truly value. And that's why we really like this technique of choice-based conjoint. Thinking a little bit more about the inputs to the experiment, we want to make sure we have a really concrete view of what the product or service could be. So we break down our product or service into those component parts. We define levels for each of those parts. And then the experimental design in the background is going to show respondents different combinations of the products and ask them to choose which one they'd be most likely to buy. Some general rules of thumb are things like don't include too many levels for any one attribute. We also want to assume that respondents probably don't have to walk away with a smartphone when they come into the store. So we should allow them to have a none alternative in the exercise. In addition, surveys can be taxing, right? So we typically like to think that respondents can handle about 10 to 14 of those questions. Any more than that, we're probably not going to get really good data. The output of a conjoint analysis gives us a utility score for every level of every attribute that we just saw on those previous slides. We can add up the utilities to determine the total utility for our product or service. And then we can pit products against each other and use a what-if simulator to test how people would choose given the different product specs. You can start to think about some of the benefits of this methodology in the fact that we can put competitor products into this what-if simulator, simulate the entire market landscape, and then really understand how our product would do against the competition. If we already have a product on the marketplace and we want to figure out if people are going to buy this new version, we can actually use conjoint analysis to understand if there's going to be cannibalization of our line extension. Even better, we have algorithms that will help us run optimization searches to figure out the optimal product combination among thousands of possible combinations. What's best about conjoint analysis is that it's an additive model, right? The total utility for a product is the sum of its parts. So here is an example of what a choice simulator might look like, where we can toggle on and off different features of the product, remove products, add products, look at the results by males versus females, or other subgroups of interest. More importantly, we can simulate what would happen if the business were to go to market with their future planned strategy compared to what's on the market today. Now, the way I like to show people how conjoint analysis works is give them an example. So let's assume that our client is the smartphone company and they have a product on the market that's $6.99. Currently, it would appear that the conjoint shows that 18% of people would choose their phone at $6.99 versus the other competitor phones. Now, this client has an idea for their next smartphone, and that is going to be a more premium smartphone. And they have some new features that are going to be added to it that are going to make it different from phone A, and they've come to us to figure out which should they price it at, $8.99 or $11.99. So we can plug the features of phone B into the choice simulator and see how would people choose, whether it's priced at $9.99 or $11.99. Now, of course, from a share perspective, more people are going to buy the product when it's cheaper. So 19% of people would buy it at $8.99. But 15% of people would still buy it at $11.99. And perhaps the company is less concerned about having their phones in the most pockets and more concerned about having more money in their pockets and pretend they might profit more off of the future state when phone B is priced at $11.99. So phone B looks like a good alternative, and our client says, hey, we have another idea for phone C, and it's got all these new features and it's extremely premium. Now what's going to happen to our share? So they introduced phone C into the market simulator, but unfortunately, it's a pretty niche product, right? Only about 4% of people are going to opt into phone C. Now, this might be enough for the business, but they're going to have to trade off the costs of manufacturing, time to production, and other things that might decide that that 4% just isn't enough for them to go to market with it. And perhaps phone C is too futuristic that they need to wait a couple of years, and then they'll get those shares that they're looking for in order to justify the cost of creating phone C. Because of the value of this methodology, these companies are using Conjoint across all phases of product development. However, we typically work in the cases of the concepting phase, where we're trying to flesh out ideas, as well as the refinement phase, right before we go to market, making sure our prices and our feature specs are on the mark. And there are tons of different verticals that actually use conjoint analysis. I talked a lot today about consumer goods or tech, if so to say, but you can use this methodology within travel, within transportation, within healthcare, within insurance, and also not just B2C, but also B2B type work. And when you use Conjoint, you get answers to questions like, how do we create our optimal pricing scheme? Or how to create the optimal product packaging so that people want to choose our product on the shelf versus somebody else's? We can also use those results to help define our market landscape or whom our target consumer is. And we can even use discrete choice methods to prioritize things like our product roadmap or which claims that we want to go after to put on our product. So when you're looking to optimize your pricing, figure out your market landscape, or prioritize your product roadmap, we strongly recommend that you consider using conjoint analysis.